and welcome to another edition of the Coach and Benway podcast. I'm Coach Redpill, joined as always by Dr. Benway, hence the name of the show. And we're going to be talking about capitalism über alles, ? Because we are conservatives, hardcore conservatives, very traditional minded. And we think that capitalism should not be the be-all, end-all. And we're going to be arguing for this case. So, Dr. Benway, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, I mean, as when you and I have discussed this in private previously, and to me, I always think of this episode, and I've wanted to do it for a while, as admittedly kind of a self-critique. Everything I can lay out about the laissez-faire mindset, the libertarian mindset, if you will, the notion that free markets is just the best way of organizing. Well, that's kind of how I more or less thought for a long time. I mean, I was bitten by the libertarian bug just as many other people. But over the course of time, seeing a lot of the capitalist system in practice, both as an observer and also up close and personal to it, as part tied to the operation of it, it felt like it was being played for a game, or not that the wool was pulling over my head, but it was a little bit of a scam, to say that there's going to be a wonderful system if government just wasn't involved. People's noblest natures would come out, and even if there was not noble natures, just the competition would keep everything in check. It's just better that way. And that's a scam. I mean, the reality of the matter is that business, government, regulations, avoidance of regulation, these are all part and parcel of how the business of capital economics gets itself done.
It's my notion of the free for all, laissez faire, what will be insofar as economics are concerned. Well, I have a fairly jaundiced view of that because, like you, I had a very up close and personal view of it growing up, and I recognize that capitalism brings out the worst in people because it's based on greed ultimately. And I do not think, as a conservative, that capitalism can be the central value of a society. I think, on the contrary, it is a useful tool, an incredibly useful tool for allocating resources and for developing new technologies and progress. Absolutely. But it's just a resource. And to see it as the be-all, end-all, as so many libertarians seem to, I think it is moral irresponsibility. It is shying away from your responsibility as a member of a society to forge the path of the society. You have to decide what you value. And it cannot be that you value the free markets over everything else. It cannot be. There are things more valuable. For instance, families. Families are more valuable than a free market. And we should be fomenting families. Instead, no, we're fomenting this free market and disregarding families or letting families atrophy. I think it's a disaster.
Well, look, think about it this way. I know a number of people in our audience are not fully 100% pure, like every individual should do their own thing. Think about it. They're antithetical to the identity politics, and in often cases are, and what that means. We certainly think that self-indulgence of things like transsexualism is some moral degeneracy. We have a concept of moral degeneracy, at least a lot of people in our audience do. But given that context, you have to reach the conclusion that this mechanism based on fulfilling our base needs and desires, our purchasing desires, somehow that's pure in this context of other moral ambiguity based largely around individual desire and consumption. Suddenly the business of making money of that is pure. You want to play that game? Yeah. You really do?
Yeah, exactly. I don't quite understand it. I don't quite understand why it is that we think as conservatives that we should rein in our passions in every other area except greed, except consumption. I don't get that at all. I just don't truck with such thinking. I think it's frankly perverse, and I think the thing that bothers me the most is this notion that capitalism will solve all your problems. I think that is just so irresponsible. It is just shying away from your moral responsibilities of just saying, just stand back and let what will be. It's a lot like those Christian scientists or that religion who they don't believe in going to doctors, that the body will heal itself. And we all think that that's laughable. I mean, even somebody like Nicholas Taleb, who's sort of like has a jaundiced view of medicine, right? Even he will agree that, well, if you have appendicitis, you got to go fucking to the fucking surgeon and get it out, okay? You can't just pray to God and let what will be. And you know, the magic of the body will heal itself. No, come on, right?
Well, that's like that reminds me of the joke. You pray, for God to save you, and you reject the doctor, and you die, and you said, "God, I prayed for you to save me. Why didn't you?" He says, "Are you fucking kidding me? I sent you a goddamn doctor."
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? But you asked a good question though. Like, why is this the untouchable part? Where does this come from? Well, I think there's certainly historic reasons, right? You and I are very fond of saying at a certain time, a certain point of thinking makes the most sense given the circumstance.
Sure.
I think for a very long time, the dominant mode of thinking, which was the hyper engineered society, was, think of the Fordist kind of Keynesian super welfare state that was from, let's say, post World War II through the late 70s at least. It got so over intertwined by its own thing that the thought that we got to loosen this up somehow made sense, right? The Reagan era, the Margaret Thatcher era. It made sense that like the whole structures of control, direct centralized control over the economy was so out to lunch that it made sense to break away from that. And to a certain extent, there is an appeal in the conservative mindset to know that the over-structured, over-engineered, over-controlled society gets too big, smaller or less control in some sense is a little bit better, or at least less government is a little bit better. I think that's, to this day, I still kind of feel that way. But what you have to also realize is, yes, you can shorten this or decrease the size of the government, but you will also have simultaneously a gigantic corporate apparatus and structure, which is just as much an extreme coercive power. And I think there's been a failure of imagination on our side to not see how intertwined and intimately related, and even just in terms of the way it exercises power, that these major companies can operate with force just like any government can. Yes, in theory they can't kill you. At least we can't prove that they can kill you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but they can do a lot of other things to you.
Yeah,
a lot of other things.
Yeah, and I love this argument that that's not real capitalism. That's crony capitalism. Yeah, well, it's the capitalism we got, motherfucker. I mean,
I like that argument. I know, and I'll just be blunt. I have seen people comment on some of our other videos we've done, like on what you can learn from socialism. People will make this comment, and I take it as an example of what we're talking about. It's basically the no true Scotsman fallacy.
Yeah.
So, the idea that like, this particular form of capitalism isn't true capitalism because, that's crony capitalism, or this one isn't right. This
tried.
One isn't. Yeah, this one isn't. Yeah. Well, you bring up a good point, because this is the exact arguments that people had with regard to the Soviet Union or any other communist experiment.
Yeah.
They said, the Soviet Union was state capitalism. The North Korea is a degenerate workers' state. That is actually the official Trotskyite term, by the way, for North Korea.
What's it called? Sorry,
a denatured or deformed or degenerate workers' state.
You're right.
And this isn't because there's a group of Trotskyists which will defend to this very day North Korea on those grounds that it's still a revolution, even in its most debased form, has to be defended because it's better than capitalism. But this you might love these intricacies. They're a fucking laugh riot, the socialists.
Yeah.
But the reality of the situation is, it's the same kind of idea. Like, you refuse to acknowledge that, like, you have to take the system as it is, warts and all, and then critique it on that. You can't say this purer world where there would have been a free market. I mean, like, point to me a fucking time in the world where there truly was free market capitalism. There wasn't. And the reason I bring this up is, if you guys had been paying attention to when we were talking to Professor Deneen, I don't mean you guys, our audience, I mean anybody who would make this critique, you would know that much like how the liberalist conception of, man in a state of nature, isolated, alone, hungry, until he makes a contract with his fellow men, finds a sovereign, and there's the new society. Bullshit. Society was never that way. It was always already a unit.
Yeah.
Just like in free market capitalism. There was this pure exchange.
Yeah.
And then there was this exterior. No, it was always denatured. There
Always.
was never this pure form. And it's a fiction that we tell ourselves in order to live, right? And, just like we conceive of ourselves as, the individual is the foundation of society, just as false.
Yeah.
The notion of, individuals acting as self-interested agents in the world of scarcity, it's not perfectly true. It's in some cases it's true enough where as Milton Friedman might say, the assumptions may be bogus, but if it's predictive, it kind of works. And I actually think he's kind of right on that.
Yeah.
It does kind of work, but it's also not there are limits to it. And he would be the first to acknowledge that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Look, the issue of capitalism, of there never having been true capitalism, right? I would argue it from the flip side. Okay, there's never been true socialism. Okay, then why does every socialist state ultimately end in some kind of dictatorship? Oh, because that's the inherent nature of socialism. We don't have a problem with that, right? What about capitalism? You leave capitalism to its own devices. Eventually, you're going to get into a state of which we have today. You have monopolies and oligopolies, no different from the end of the 19th century. It is no different. There's a reason that the trust busters rose up, because those trusts, those monopolies and oligopolies were strangling the economy. Capitalism, left to its own devices, will eventually lead to a monopolistic state whereby the government and the private enterprise, the oligarchs, are in cahoots, and they are strangling the people, and they are shearing the sheep, and eventually they're going to start to slaughter the sheep, okay? Because they shear them, and sometimes they just start skinning them alive, and that's that. Okay, so we as the sheep in this metaphor, well, we're going to have to rise up, motherfucker, now, aren't we? Because it just seems it seems that see, you cannot say that capitalism has never been tried. It is in practice. This is the capitalism that we got, and we got to deal with it. And we have to see that every time capitalism winds up in the same spot, in monopolistic, oligopolistic practices that throttle the society, that create debt slaves of us all, that mortgage our future for the sake of present-day trinkets and loans. I mean, that's the thing. This is what it leads to inevitably. It's always happened. So we got to fix it.
To me, the best phrasing of it, I think Tucker Carlson is spot on this. When I talked about when he was arguing with Ben Shapiro, of course, the exchange of goods and services, fine. Excessive amount of just regulations for the sake of regulations, of course, that can be silly at times. But fundamentally, what is true? Are the people who live in a society sovereign, or is faith in a mechanism of economics sovereign, and we are secondary to that?
Yeah,
that's the fundamental question.
That's exactly
to me,
right.
And it's like, people will say like, oh, if you criticize capitalism, you must be about wealth redistribution. I'm like, well, actually, no, I'm not. In fact, if you actually listen to what I say, I've never even brought it up as a good idea.
Yeah.
What I have said is that ultimately the population as a whole has sovereignty over what a company can and cannot do. I think it's different from saying like, you cannot be this big and hold us all hostage like a bank too big to fail. We're going to make you smaller.
Yeah.
That is not really wealth redistribution.
No.
Any guy who says it is just playing parlor tricks to convince you otherwise.
Exactly.
That's protecting ourselves from you fucking up in a way that damages us.
Yeah.
Much different.
Yeah, it's because monopolistic practices, eventually they will hold the populace hostage. That's inevitable. It has happened every single time. There's nothing wrong with thinking that capitalism is a great system and recognizing that it has to be limited. And it has to be limited so that we can decide, like grown-ups and not like irresponsible buffoons, that there are some values that we hold higher than the free enterprise, than the free market. Yeah. That's the thing that bothers me so much about our side. It's that they refuse to take that step of saying, okay, we have values that are more important than the free market. What are those values? They don't want to. And it seems to me because a lot of neocons sort of like I guess what it is that, see, you start to realize that these guys are shills. They are ultimately shills for the corporations and the corporatists. Like people like, what's the name of the guy, the op-ed writer on the New York Times, Thomas Friedman, is it?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah,
right.
the cheerleader for all the new and the stupid and yeah. He's the kind of guy who loves the free market over anything else, but refuses to identify any value as higher than free market. That's just wrong. There are values higher than the free market, more important, things that we must protect more than a free market. families. I mean, that's the thing that drives me a little bit nuts, because ultimately the base unit of any society is not the individual; it's the family. If you don't have families, you are rapidly going to have a society that ceases to exist. And so you need families. You need to foment families. You need to foment them so that they have children and that these children are happy and healthy. That's a reasonable thing, a reasonable value. I would argue it's a necessary value. I mean, that's my point of view, of course.
No, I agree with you. And there's two types of neoconservative shows in a way on this question. There's what you would the example you gave, I would consider like the true corporatist shills, like the guys who really will make the economics professors usually who will make a point of saying, oh, these businesses never have to be regulated. These banks are all good. Let me lobby on their behalf. Give me some checks. Right. Those are, there's a lot of self-interest there. I don't say they're lying through their teeth. I'm sure a lot of them believe it, but it's not an accident they get wealthy off of it too.
Yeah. Well, you tend to believe the thing that gives you a paycheck now, don't you?
Of course, exactly. It worked for me. It can work for you. But the other type, the true neoconservatives, the ones you think of, the Bill Kristol, the Max Boots, when it comes to the economy, I don't even think they give a shit about the economy, really. They're only concerned about international relations, their personal beef with Russia, and basically converting the rest of the world into replicas of liberal democracies, which is probably
and all of them with a best friend in Israel.
It's so ludicrous. And then sometimes you get some weirdos who are in between, like Ben Shapiro, who probably believes both, right? But and that's kind of like the tomfoolery there. But you set up something very good, which I've also been harping on, which is the succession of your responsibility. Because it also relates to the other thing with libertarianism that I always had trouble with, even when I was trying to defend it myself, is that is-ought problem. You have to, the is situation is you always, if you're critiquing and you're suggesting, you're making, what we have to do, you always have to deal with the world as it exists in front of you. What often happens is we conceive of an ought world, right? One of the best examples I like to give as a corollary is pacifism. During any major war, the pacifist argument invariably is, we shouldn't fight a war because no one should fight a war. And my response to that is, if someone's pissed off at you and you're going to be the guy who on moral principles, independent of the situation, is like, I'll be the only one who's nonviolent. Well, you've just succeeded your control to them. They will kill you regardless.
Yeah.
That's dealing with the only way that conception of the world works is if everybody doesn't fight. Yeah. Guess what? Everybody does fight. So you're fucked.
Yeah.
Same way with the free marketeers. Like, if everybody acted in enlightened self-interest, if we all knew each other, we lived in a community, we all held, like, we felt ourselves morally responsible, I could easily see the system working. We don't. And you guys know it doesn't, because I know you guys note the degeneracy in the world. I know you note that individuals make poor decisions in a way that harms other people. What you're failing to realize is that they're related. If you think you're going to give concessions on buying shit, then you have no basis for the other self-interest. It's based off the same delusion.
Yeah. They don't see it. This notion, it's a weird. Yeah, exactly. You're saying basically it's an idealism, that they are locked into idealism, and that therefore, because of their idealism, they do not see that nobody lives up to that ideal, or very few. Or look, even one person deciding, no, I'm not going to live up to this ideal, wrecks the whole system. So how can you have a system based on such a value? I don't have a problem with the government regulating, okay? And in point of fact, I think that it's useful and necessary in so many conditions. And in so many conditions that a lot of these capitalism uber alles people, these libertarians, sort of like are horrified when I say, oh, we need capitalism, but they blithely accept when, for instance, the FDA makes sure that, the ingredients in the candy bar are all FDA approved. Nobody has a problem with that kind of regulation. So we're not talking about regulation now, are we? We're talking about what sort of regulation. And so that's the issue, right? It's sort of like the libertarians are like, I don't want any regulation, but I do want regulation on the things that matter to me. Oh, then that's a very, very different story now, isn't it, mister? You see what I'm saying? I think that the regulation is what trips them up, a lot of these libertarians. Yeah. Because if we truly were living in a land of capitalism without regulation, we would probably, in short order, be poisoned by some food manufacturer, as has happened in China a number of times. You remember a few years ago that the powdered milk factory was deliberately putting in, like, I don't know, melanin? No, not melanin.
Maybe talc or something like
Talcum?
that.
Yeah, something like that. And it wasn't milk, and some babies died. And well, the Chinese solved the problem the way the Chinese do, which is that they had a trial on a Monday. The guilty verdict was on Tuesday, and on Wednesday they got shot. I mean, it was like that. And I have no compassion for such people who would deliberately poison babies by putting in talcum powder instead of powdered milk. I mean, more power to the Chinese government. I mean, the commies and I see eye to eye on that particular issue. But you see my point. You see, if we're left to our own devices, we're going to wind up poisoning our people. That's why so much of the trust busters and so much of the regulations of the early 20th century came to pass, because people were doing that. They were putting, sawdust into coffee and other things in order to say, oh, it's coffee, but to sell more, to make more money, because people are cheats. That's the thing that libertarians don't want to acknowledge. People are cheats, and they will cheat to get ahead. Why can't they acknowledge that?
I think it's related to, and I think all humans have this tendency, right? And we tend to conceive of things as like an on-off switch, right?
Mm-hmm.
We either regulate everything or we do nothing. You know what I mean? There's 100,000 degrees of separation between those two extensions, right? I mean, I think because people do get used to, and I get where that thought is coming from, that this general, hall monitorness that a lot of societies have, which is like, why are you reading that book versus that book, or don't run so fast, or don't comb your hair this way or that way. Obviously, all of those things are absurd. I agree with you completely. But, that isn't to say, like, we are impotent in response to any kind of bully that comes through. I'll give you one other thing. I'm actually perfectly fine with people, organizing to demand better wages from their employer. And by that, I do mean unionization.
Sure.
That's how it gets done. We get together and say, you got to pay us this much. The company says, I can only pay you that much. You negotiate it out. That's fine. That's how people. That's
but
how
I disagree
operates.
on unions with governments, for government workers. I disagree on unions for government workers. I think that unions for government workers leads to because there's no competition. Okay, there's only one buyer for the labor of government workers, and therefore the workers have the upper hand, and they can eventually get concessions that the government simply cannot afford. As we've seen, like the pension problem that's going to become a scandal soon enough, that the governments have promised such high pensions and so many benefits to retired workers, government workers, because of the unions, because the unions twisted the arms of the governments, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas this doesn't happen in private enterprise, because private enterprise would say, I can't afford you, so I'll just shut down, So,
well, but you iterate a good point that the reality of the world, sorry to say, people, is complexity.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's going to be different in different situations. Yeah, in government, in theory, the extra check on that should be the voters because like we don't fucking give a shit in certain regards. We should say kick the fuckers out. But needless to say, it's each circumstance you deal with it on its terms. Yeah, this is sometimes called pragmatism.
Yeah, and
it's
nuance.
Actually an intelligent philosophy.
Nuance. Yeah. Let me go back to an early point that I made that I find very I want to examine a little bit, which is this notion that there are conservatives who are pragmatists and who have a relatively jaundiced view of humanity. And there are conservatives who have this bizarre idealistic view of human beings, as if people would not cheat. You see, like I said before, because I come from Chile. And I talked in a previous episode about the elections in Chile. And in the elections in Chile, we know down to the last vote, literally to the last vote, exactly what the vote tally was, because our system is built in a way where we assume that every party is trying to cheat. And therefore, since we assume that everybody is trying to cheat, we've designed a system that is cheat-proof, okay, and totally transparent, precisely because of the notion that we do not trust our fellow voters. We do not trust our fellow party members that they're not going to cheat the ballot somehow, right? And this makes an incredibly transparent and precise election mechanism. I explained it in some detail in a previous episode. I forget which one. You'll just have to find it somewhere. But basically, what it is that representatives of all the parties have to scrutinize each and every vote, and they are all paper ballots. And there's no computer balloting or any shit like that. And it's all by hand, paper ballot. And representatives of every party get to scrutinize every single vote. And so the tally is usually like on the money. I mean, there's never any mistake, right? Because the system is such. Everybody, because they used to cheat so much back in the day, in the 19th century, they would cheat so much and so egregiously that everybody just got sick and tired of it. And they just agreed to make a foolproof system. Whereas in the United States, everybody acts around with such naivete, and they think that, oh, nobody's going to cheat, and we're just going to do it like that and just take our word for it. Even fucking Paul Ryan, the most cucked out cuck of the GOP, even he's saying that the results of a lot of the California House of Representatives races was just weird. Yeah, because they cheated, and the Republicans are too fucking naive to say it out loud, to say they cheated. Why can't a sector of our side of the conservative be more realistic? Why do they live in la la land? Why are they so fucking idealistic and stupidly idealistic? I'd like to know. Please, somebody tell me.
Well, to me, it's very clear. I mean, this is the liberal ideology as we spoke of. I mean, when we say that America is a liberal country, we mean both
you're talking
Republicans and Democrats.
Liberal Democrat, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. They're liberal in the old sense of the word. Now, there used to be an argument against this. People always said it was a fanciful, crazy little stupid book that people put faith in. But frankly, the Christian argument on this, I think, fundamentally understands humans correctly. Humans are broken, fucked up people.
Yeah.
We make mistakes. We do stupid things. We harm each other. We don't have enlightened self-interest at heart. We're easily prone to doing bad things. It's not a perfectible species. We work through it. We muddle it. We're not perfect. I think we have forgotten that.
Mm.
You can choose not to believe in the resolution provided by Christ all you want. I don't care. The notion of what humans are not perfectible or perfect people should be understood, because a lot of the worst examples, both capitalism and socialism, are predicated on that. They're versions of liberalism.
Yeah,
they really are. That's just different strategies to get it.
Yeah, and it drives me nuts. When all of a sudden, when you have 7-8 candidates for the House of Representatives and they won the election, but all of a sudden these votes are discovered, and everybody's like, oh yeah, so I guess we lost, and they take it with such equanimity, as if they want to lose. What the fuck is wrong with these fucking people? They got cheated. Can't they see that? And by the same token, can't they see how so many of these companies cheat? Like Monsanto cheats, like the FANGs, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. They cheat. They cheat consistently. They spend money on lobbyists. Why? Why? They want the people on Capitol Hill to think that Google is such a nice company? No, they want policies that will favor them. And they figure, I'll throw $500,000 at lobbyists over here, and I'll get some incentive or tax break over here that'll be worth $200 million. It's a great investment. Don't people realize, conservatives realize what the hell is going on? Why are they so goddamn naive? I understand your explanation, and it was a very cogent and on-point explanation, but I still can't understand it, okay, on a visceral level. How can anybody be that fucking naive? That's the question I want to know, of just believing that capitalism can solve all of your problems. Because it seems to me because at least the shills who are the corporatist shills who are on the payroll of big corporations like, the guys at PragerU and all the rest of it, Ben Shapiro to an extent, I understand what they're coming from. It's just self-interest, okay? But there are so many who are not getting paid, who spout the same crap. And I am just like, like Styx Hexenhammer 666, right? He's like the naive belief that capitalism can solve all problems, and that the reason capitalism doesn't work perfectly is because we've been dumb enough to put in regulations. No, man. If we didn't have the regulations, we'd have babies dying from ingesting talcum powder instead of milk, for crying out loud. Oh, I'm ranting.
Well,
Save me.
here's the thing. Well, here's the thing. There's a failure of imagination here.
Yeah.
And let me scratch that. It's a failure of understanding. Perhaps it's an excess of imagination. As I said, there's too much belief that, there's a perfect system here. We just got to allow it to work. Well, the system has been working, and it trends towards not just monopolization. You can accept that, and even if you set it aside, what really is happening here is it leads to more government control. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, all of these systems work healthily with it. Think about in America when we were growing, all of the tariffs that we imposed to protect our industries. It was the northern industries that had that. And they turned around and said, "Oh, the South, you weaker guys, fuck you. You're not getting any tariffs. We can fuck you all we want, and we're going to take advantage of that situation. And we'll re-engineer the society too. We'll even create a civil war to allow it to happen." You know what I mean? I mean, there's too much intertwinedness. And today, what we fail to realize is that it's too easy for these large companies to want to not just allow, but to want and desire to re-engineer you. I mean, think of let's go back, a few hundred years. Let's go to Ford. You all know Fordlandia. Ford's idea of I'm going to basically build a society in South America where everybody worked for Ford. Ford owned everything, and it was a hyper-engineered society. I determine what you can eat, what you can drink, what clothing you're going to wear, control what you say, and all of that stuff. And people say, just find another job. This shouldn't even be entertained by a company, right? And he did it. And you can't turn around and play the game with me he was really a socialist at the end of the day. No, Ford was interested in making money. You also can't turn around and say, he's a dirty Jew guy. If you read any 2 seconds about Henry Ford, he's not that kind of guy.
No.
Trust me on this one thing.
Anti-Semite, yeah. For those of you who don't know, yeah.
Exactly. Reprinted the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This, and that's the thing that really bothers me about this notion there's a purity in the business over here.
No.
You have to take responsibility. Part of the reason that a society will function is, as I said, the people are sovereign. They know what will harm them and keep things in check. If you continue to believe that companies alone will solve the situation, you have no recourse when they do everything that in their power to censor you, to starve you, to deny you basic services, because they don't care.
Yeah.
And they never do.
Because ultimately the rise of monopolies inevitably leads to them being intertwined with government. And we're seeing this all over the place. All the big corporations today, they have massive government contracts. Sometimes they deliberately go into these massive government contracts in order to create these bridges with the government so that the interests of the government and the interests of the company are intertwined in a way that cannot be pulled apart. And so therefore the government starts working in the interests of the company. We saw this in the banking sector, for crying out loud. This whole notion of the too big to fail. And what happened? Well, the government went and bailed them out now, didn't they? Yeah. And did they break them up later? No, they did not. They allowed them to just continue on. This is what happens when you have monopolistic, oligopolistic economies that are the inevitable result of capitalism, not run amok even. It's capitalism given free rein. It's not running amok yet. It's just free rein. And it winds up that the financial sector is perfect, because what happened was that, essentially what happened was that the banking sector became so big and so powerful in the economy and in the government that the government socialized the losses, but the winnings, they remain private. And so that's the regime that we've been living under insofar as the financial sector is concerned. And the financial sector views people as sheep to be sheared. That's how they view people. And the government is making no effort to really rein them in. Oh, they talk about Frank Dodd and some shit like that, but that was just practically cosmetic, for crying out loud. It really did not do the job. What they should have done is allowed all these banks to go bankrupt. But
remember what happened. The first vote of TARP. No, we're not going to do this. The market will decide. Guess what the market demanded after that? You fuckers voted wrong. Go back.
Go back and vote again. Yeah, and
Yeah, they can always say
forced
like,
that?
yeah,
Who forced
exactly.
that? Hank Paulson forced that. The
And not
Treasury
just Hank,
Secretary.
and
Yeah,
not just Hank. It was Hank
everybody.
through the Federal Reserve Board and through most of the banks. They knew it. Yeah, you'll always have Jamie Dimon playing the game like I was forced to take this and I didn't
Yeah, I
want
was
to.
forced to
It's
take
like
the money to
yeah,
save my bank from bankruptcy. Yeah, I was forced to.
yeah. It's like yeah. J.P. Morgan was forced to acquire all these assets, which it made billions on. I'm
Yeah.
sorry for J.P. Morgan. Really bad fucking deal you had there, Jamie.
Oh man, it's a nightmare. A nightmare. Jesus Christ. Come
How
on.
dare you slow down my car with an extra pound of cash?
Yeah. Yeah. But like, look, that's what happens inevitably in any capitalist society. And there's a thing about Americans, by the way. It seems that the Americans have an inability to do nuance. You talked about it before. In America, there's like 100% regulation or 0% regulation, not 50% regulation. People don't understand that you can put the volume dial not at 0 and not at 11. You could put it at 4, 5, or even 3 or 7, but not all the way. But Americans seem to think that it's either all or nothing, 1 or 0. I don't quite get it. I don't get it. Because a lot of other societies do not have this problem. Most other societies are grown up enough and adult enough not to have this fucking problem.
Like I said, I honestly think Patrick Deneen's right. It just shows how liberal our country is, again, in that old sense, because what was his big point? Well, when you conceive in the liberal ideology that the individual is the basis and the individual seeking its desires, and you're breaking down all of these, awful power structures like the family, like religion, like marriage, whatever institutions that are terrible. You're just left with these floating individuals. How do they affirm everything? How in that rootless, cultureless society do they seek to resolve everything? Centralized government with power. And it is not surprising that as capitalism grows, and people always say, oh, more government means more problem. Like, yeah, well, more capitalism means more government because it's more individualism, and more individualism devoid of any kind of structure to the natural order of things, religious order of things, pick your poison, will do this. It will create this problem. And I guarantee you, if you don't think corporations want regulations to protect them or to help curry favor, even if there is corruption in there, you haven't been paying attention.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And it's not some big conspiracy that there's a small group of people figuring this out.
No.
The system has been doing this for years.
Let's talk about that small group of people, because there are a lot of people, it seems to me, on our side of the fence who seem to think that it's Jewish people who are into this. No. It's not Jewish people. It's not like some, the protocols from the Elders of Zion shit, okay? It's just the way human beings are, for crying out loud. You can take the straightest Episcopalian. The thing is, when Americans talk like that about, oh, it's the Jews who do it, they've never obviously been to Holland. I've been to Holland. I know a lot of Dutch people. Okay, my stepfather is Dutch. I'm telling you, man, they are the most rapacious people on the face of the earth. And they're Protestant or Catholic, right? And yeah, it has nothing to do with them being, Jewish. It has everything to do with human nature. Or more to the point, perhaps, the fact that is a large swath of Americans who are not like this, who have grown up in such comfort and material plenty, that they do not think like that. Because the Dutchmen that I knew that were like almost violently rapacious, most of them had grown up in want. During the Second World War and in the aftermath, they had grown up in want and they never wanted to experience that again. And they were a little bit traumatized by it. It was an interesting thing to think, because you go to Amsterdam today, you go to Rotterdam, any city in Holland, and it's, a cornucopia of plenty, right? But see, all those cities were bombed out, and so it created a mentality. But anyway, I'm going off point.
Well, remember, the great book is the Protestant work ethic and the spirit of capitalism.
Yeah.
It's not the Jewish work ethic and the spirit of capitalism.
Yeah.
And also, who's the biggest bankers today and who really started a lot of the banking that we know it? The Catholic Church. The Vatican is one of the best bankers in the fucking world. Yeah. Trust me on this one fact. We all play the game, and this is what bothers me. I mean, look, I'll give you a bone here. Of course, I can point to Jews who will go out of their way to just say Israel above all else, everybody bend the knee, or Jews who in self-interest will try to convince people to believe things they don't believe, all of that could very well be true. But what also is true that we are all, in our own way, complicit in a lot of the fucking sins of the way our world does business.
Yeah.
We all participate in it. You can't just assume that because some group of people are notoriously thought of as this way or the other, that you have no responsibility, it was all their fault. That's disingenuous. That's not doing your civic duty and saying, I am an individual in a society who is responsible to make sure that if a big company is fucking over our society as a whole, or my people, however you want to phrase it, you have a responsibility to say, we're in control here, goddammit, not some fucking technological monstrosity that's going to help a guy get rich.
Yeah. And here's something interesting. Like what Deneen pointed out and laid out very eloquently is that, the liberal democratic project, of which the United States is a product, the liberal democratic project started with Machiavelli. And Machiavelli's great insight is people might aspire to being great, but they are actually quite base. And you have to recognize that fact and deal with the fact that they are quite base, that they are driven by low motivations, and that most people are of low character. And if you integrate that into your thinking, you'll get much better results in any kind of project that you set out to do, which is quite brilliant, an insight if you think about it, because so much of previous political philosophy and art and literature was based on the notion of striving towards greatness, not accepting the fact that human beings are flawed, right? And the later projects of the founding fathers of the United States, of James Madison specifically, the whole notion of checks and balances, it was a system based on the notion that the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive would, at one point or another, try to overtake all political power. And therefore, by having checks and balances, these three branches of government would be forever chasing each other and trying to control each other and trying to limit each other's power. It was supposed to be a mechanism that accepted people's inherent badness, evil, if you will, and set it in a direction that would make for a self-correcting system, which was fucking brilliant if you think about it, right? But insofar as capitalism is concerned, there isn't an easy, elegant solution like the Madisonian solution to the political problem. In capitalism, in the world of the marketplace, there is no easy fix where you can have one organization set to chasing another in such a way that the people benefit and those powers are forever limited by competition among one another. It's just not the case. The only two powers you have are the free market and the government. And so you have to have, and that, of course, you can never have a stable platform with just 2 points, right? You need 3 points for a stable platform. And so since you only have two, the private enterprise and the government, it's always going to be imbalanced. And that's life, and we're going to just have to deal with it. Right now, it seems to me that we've skewed the power towards the private corporations that have, in turn, co-opted the government. They have co-opted it and created this crony capitalism that has allowed these monopolies and oligopolies. Now we have to go back. We have to slide that meter over towards the side of government, towards the side of regulation, whether we like it or not. But we have to do that. We have to be breaking up some of these companies. If it were my druthers, I'd start with the banking oligopolies and monopolies, and also the retail monopoly, which is emerging with Amazon. I think that Amazon is pernicious and must be destroyed. I think it's catastrophic for people.
And the thing is, that keep in mind with all of these initiatives, these initiatives don't require me like going around to all the poor peasants of the world and stealing their money.
No.
None of this involves that. Or even rich people and taking their money. Yeah. It's recognizing the structures that have been built around. I mean, yes, people say like, oh, socialism only works until you run out of other people's money. Frankly, I don't even give a shit about other people's money. Yeah, I give a shit about the structure of the company damaging the society as a whole. And if it's too big, I will break it into 5 pieces. I don't fucking care.
Break it into more
and make or whatever, pick your poison on that. So that's again, it's like always it's either 100% one way or 100% the other way, and it's just never true. And if you want to talk about, oh, well, we're excessive on welfare programs, I'd say, you know what? The biggest welfare program that I don't think we should be involved with, it's the fucking empire.
Mm. Yeah.
You know what? When we, think about all the money spent to protect Europe from itself,
Basically.
basically, and all of the only people who benefit from that equation
Are the Europeans.
are the defense contractors and the Europeans.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not defending our own borders. I'll grant you that. That's a little bit where I would like a little bit of restrained government for sure. You know what I mean? That's why I say that the world is complicated. Your mind should be just as complicated. Don't basically be a mirror image of a leftist, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because the leftists have this idiotic notion, oh, it's never been tried. It has too been fucking tried. It's been tried time and time again. It always, always, always ends up the same. One man controlling the whole fucking thing and everybody else is a slave.
Well, like, I remember I a little while ago, I joked to you, like, the weird notion of the libertarian government. It's almost like the problem of God's omnipotence. It's like, can God create a rock so big that even he cannot lift it?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? The whole notion that's like, oh, well, the government should just, force itself not to use its power, corrosively or evilly or whatnot. And you think to yourself, well, if it could command itself not to do something, it can easily command itself to do something.
Yeah.
So it means it already has the power. So you're already fucked on that. We always conceive, like leftists, we can conceive of these alternative realities where things are so better and they're perfect and everybody operates well. And I do think it is a loss. I reiterate myself, but I really underline this point. Like, I think there's something lost when we think that human beings are perfectible.
Yeah, and also I think I just have to address this because I think that Benway and I are both pissed off that people in the comments think that we're socialist shills or some shit like that because we're in favor of regulation. It just really pisses me off. It pisses me off because I've given this shit a lot of thought. I have seen, or let me phrase it, I never lived under socialism, but my grandparents did, and a lot of the friends of my parents did. And we lived outside of Chile and avoided the socialist regime in Chile because we knew that if we moved to Chile, we'd be in a shitload of trouble during the socialist regime of Salvador Allende. Okay, so I know exactly what socialism entails and how awful it is. And so to accuse me of being like, I'm really like a socialist shill or something like that, fuck you. I mean, it bothers me. I gotta admit it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it probably. I mean, I could get hot under the collar too, but it is funny. Similar to me, like my. It's funny. My grandparents on my father's mother's side, the Russian grandparents, the aristocracy and everything. They were killed under the Soviet system. But guess what system they lived in before? It wasn't a free market par excellence. They lived under the Tsar.
Right.
It's a different system entirely. There are complicated systems that you have at your disposal. I mean, the notion that there's only this one, the United States particular that we all have to live to. I mean, let's not kid ourselves on this. I mean, and the reason I brought up the the comments is because I think when I see in those comments, I see in myself from however many years ago.
Yeah.
Which means I'm not smarter than you. I'm pretty much the same kind of person as you are. I see the attitudes I had, and I see how I kind of had to denature my thinking in order to accommodate it. Why? Because I thought it was ethically pure, or I thought, the alternatives were this, that, or the other. A lot of it was just based on lack of experience, fundamentally.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it was in high school, frankly. When you're in high school, you think you know everything, better,
yeah.
And you don't know shit. And, you think, like I remember in high school when I was saying like, oh, if someone's treating you like shit at a job, just find a new fucking job. And I was like, how hard, if only life were that easy. You know what I mean? The best I could say is that the world is complicated. We all should know this. It requires complicated thinking, complicated solutions. To simply hope that, Friedrich Hayek's road to serfdom is the only ethical guide to government, you're missing out on the complicated relationships. And like I said, you're being impacted right now. I know our group of people are being impacted by how Twitter thinks society should be run, how Facebook thinks society should be run. If Gab can't even get a fucking, host sponsor to deal with their company, that should bemuse you against, or persuade you away from the idea that, like, oh, you can always just build your own platform.
Yeah, build your own
You know,
platform.
just engage in the competitive economic spirit.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah, right.
yeah. And then when the people who make that argument, like Annabeth Stuckey or Annabelle Stuckey, whatever the fuck her name
Ally
is,
Beth Stuckey, yeah.
Ally Beth Stuckey starts turning around and says, "Yeah, they're just no good people. It's okay what happens to them. These
Fuck
are your
you.
free market. These are their free market defenders.
Yeah.
Look at look at your works. You look at my works, ye brethren, or ye children in despair.
Ye mighty, ye mighty,
mighty
and despair. Yeah, no, look, this notion, how can I put it? It's laughable when they say, "Oh, if you can't get on that platform, make your own platform." Capitalism will abide. The dude abides. Capitalism will abide. Look, my thinking is that in the coming civil war, right, in the after effects, we will have the opportunity to revamp capitalism and steer it away from this cronyism. It's not even cronyism, because people call it crony capitalism. It's not. It's monopolistic, which is very different. Okay, a crony capitalism means that it's basically friendships. But look at the experience of General Electric. General Electric is going down the tubes, right? If there was truly crony capitalism, it wouldn't be going down the tubes. It would be propped up by the government. But they're not allowing it. They're not propping it up. They are allowing it to go down the tubes because there are other competitors in the various monopolies, oligopolies that it's involved in, and they're eating away at General Electric's share. It's really GE Financial that's bringing GE down, and also it's absurd pension promises. But anyway, that's for a different conversation. The point is, it is monopolistic. And the monopolies and oligopolies, at the end of the day, they do not serve the people. They deliver products at a lower price, yes, because all monopolies, all oligopolies, by definition, deliver lower prices, okay? Because they can afford to have much lower margins, because they're the only game in town. They're never going to lose a customer, right? So monopolies and oligopolies do deliver lower prices, but that cannot be the highest value. It's more important for us as a society to pay higher prices, but to have healthy competition, than to pay lower prices and have everything that we want, but be beholden to one or just 2-3 players. That's the issue, it seems to me. And I think it goes back to that whole notion that what's more important, competition or prices? I personally believe competition is more important as a value because it makes for a healthier society. I think that's where it comes from. What do you think?
Well, certainly competition would make for a better society, but I also think what makes for a better society is a society that recognizes that it has goals beyond cheap shoes, that it has goals that seek to instill the dignity of its people, and seeks to create a world that is much better overall for people, that other than to just assume that they can get their kicks off. You can't buy your way to heaven. You can't eat your way out of despair.
Yeah, well, that's what, all because I think that's what people are doing right now. They're trying to eat their way out of their despair, because I think that's the problem that we're all having as a society. Despair. Yeah, my sense, my notion is that the one thing that universally gives people meaning is a family of their own. And we should be aiming for that. Not cheap hedonistic pleasures of the flesh, but truly aiming towards a higher goal, a higher purpose. And that is a family of, like how fulfilled I feel when I feel that I'm working towards the betterment of my family, how much satisfaction that gives me. And I can tell you that in the years that I lived without a family and just on my own, living for myself, yeah, I could indulge in all kinds of hedonistic pleasures, but it did not make me happy. Not at all. It did not make me content. No, it made me kind of miserable, to tell you the truth. But when I was working towards the betterment of my family, there was some satisfaction to it, a great deal of satisfaction. And I think that the thing that we as a society should be aiming for is turning away from the liberal democratic notion of the individual and turning towards a full embrace of the family, of the nuclear family, of the wife, the husband, the kids, the wife staying at home raising the kids, and the man earning a living to support the family. And we should be fomenting that. And we should be telling women, a career, it can wait. Children and a family are more important, and we should be doing that. And instead of like catering to what women want and saying, oh yeah, you should have a career and shit like that. Look, I often think of Michelle Houellebecq's novel Submission, which is of the novels I've read in the past 10 years, it's the one that's had the most impact on me. And in point of fact, it's the book that started our partnership, because we did a live stream and discussion of the book. And in Houellebecq's book, Islam took over France. And it's basically how that happened. And yes, I think that unless there's some sort of catastrophe that allows us to have a clean break with the past and a clean sweep of the table, unless we have some sort of catastrophe, I think that our society is going to slowly decay. And I think that a culture that does value families, that does keep women in their place and with their priorities straight, will overtake us. I think it's inevitable. I think that the Muslims will take over unless there is some sort of catastrophe that makes us as a society, and I'm talking about the West, of course, makes us reevaluate everything that we've held dear and makes us, straighten up and fly right. You know what I'm saying? But the way we're going, I think we're gonna crash, because it's going to be a demographic reality that those people that do have 2.2 or more children per woman are going to win. I think it's just inevitable. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's a sign of the despair that I think our side feels. If you think that there is enough to be despairing of this world, if you are black-pilled, but somehow you think that the free market world is kind of like the solution to that,
no, you're fucked.
You have a shovel in your hand and you're digging a grave.
Yeah,
that's what's happening.
Yeah. If you think that more capitalism will solve the problem, no. It's not that capitalism caused the problems. No, of course not.
No. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. But capitalism, capitalism, like any other kind of organizing system, bears the psychological limits and scars of the people who exhibit it, right?
Yeah. So
if capitalism could very well be flailing along, and I think in some sense it is, not to say that it's not making money. Certainly it is, unless you're looking at the stock market these days. But by and large it is, But if think about all the money you can spend on transgenderism. Think about all the money to be made off of the abuse and denaturing of families and men, women, or whatever. And you just come to realize it's bearing the reflection of the scars that we as human beings have. And if the world is all the product of human beings organizing, well, the best we can do to save ourselves is to really realize that we have to, in some sense, take control of ourselves. And that means, frankly, the aspects of life that are in pain. And I'm sorry, just because you think that, there's purity freed from regulation, that's like saying I'm free to wallow in my own suffering. No one can help me.
Yeah.
That's there's nothing more solipsistic and individualistic and atomizing than that no one can interfere with my consumption. That's like saying no one can interfere with me when I'm a drunk.
Yeah.
I'm alone and in despair.
Exactly. Yeah. Well
you don't
said.
Want that.
No, we don't want that. And I think that that's an excellent image with which to end the episode. So I want to thank you very much for having listened in to the Coach and Benway podcast on this particular issue. And we hope to see you soon. Take it easy.
Later.